You know what they say, there are two kinds of people in the world, men who don't get women and women who don't get women. In our last video, we talked about how men choose their partners. Guys tend to focus a lot on signs of youth and beauty. You know, things like age, looks, and body type. But here's the funny thing. Even when a man finds his dream girl who is young and beautiful, and they have kids together, there's always this nagging worry about paternity. That's why loyalty matters so much to men. But wait, it gets more interesting. Even when men find someone who's young, gorgeous, fit, and totally faithful, guys across pretty much every culture are still more likely to chase after affairs than their wives are. And when it comes to casual dating, all those high standards about loyalty just fly right out the window, along with pretty much everything else they claimed was important. Talk about a double standard, right? I know you guys probably weren't too excited about our last video. After all, you already know what makes you tick. But today's episode, this one's especially for you. In today's video, we're going to look at how women choose their partners, with insights drawn from two books, Evolutionary Psychology and The Evolution of Desire. Remember last time when we talked about why guys often go for casual relationships? Well, back in ancient times, if a man hooked up with lots of different women, he could potentially father multiple children with different partners, basically spreading his genes far and wide. But for women, the story is different. Women have a much bigger stake in the game. Even if a woman from ancient times had multiple partners, she could only have one baby at a time. Plus, she's the one dealing with all the challenges and risks of pregnancy and childbirth. Think about it. If a woman wasn't picky about her partner and ended up having a baby with some guy who turned out to be a total deadbeat, you know, the type who wouldn't help provide for the family, fooled around with other women, couldn't hold down a job, and had a mean streak, well, both she and her child would be in for some seriously tough times. Life suddenly becomes incredibly tough for these women. We're talking survival mode tough. Their kids face even bigger challenges because they don't have the support they need to thrive. And here's the real kicker. Even if a mom somehow manages to raise her child against all odds, even if that kid makes it to adulthood, they're starting life with a huge disadvantage. Without a father's support and resources, they'll likely struggle to build their own families and have kids of their own. It's like a learning curve that played out over generations. First, some women went for the smooth-talking charmer types, only to find out these guys wouldn't step up when it came to family life. Their daughters saw this mess and thought, okay, I'll avoid the players. But then some of them ended up with guys who, sure, were faithful, but couldn't get off the couch to save their lives. The next generation thought they had it all figured out by avoiding both the players and the couch potatoes. But some still ended up with partners who, despite their best intentions, just couldn't get their act together enough to support a family. See the pattern here? Over thousands of generations, women basically developed a built-in radar for guys who could not only talk the talk, but also walk the walk. Men who would make real commitments and actually had the ability to follow through on them. This kind of partner preference isn't just a human thing. You can see it in the animal world too. Take shrikes, for example. These clever birds have an interesting dating ritual. Before breeding season, male shrikes go on a collecting spree. They gather all sorts of stuff, food, feathers, even bits of fabric, and they display their collection prominently around their territory, kind of like setting up a fancy storefront. Female shrikes then go shopping, visiting different males' territories before picking their mate, and guess who usually wins? The guys with the biggest collection. But then, researchers made a little move. They took all the collected items from the most popular male shrikes, the ones with multiple partners, and moved them to the territories of the bachelors, who hadn't attracted any mates. And just like that, poof, the previously successful males suddenly found themselves without any admirers. Women's attraction to men follows a surprisingly similar pattern. They tend to favor guys with good resources and stability. But here's a thought-provoking question. Since humans are the creators of civilization and masters of the planet, can we really say our mate selection behavior is comparable to that of shrikes? Back in 1939, researchers did an interesting study. They asked both men and women to rank 18 different personal qualities that might matter when choosing a partner. Participants had to be really specific. They needed to mark which qualities were deal breakers and which ones were just nice to haves. Here's what they found. Women rated financial potential as super important, basically a must-have. Men, they just saw it as a bonus. In fact, women cared about financial stability twice as much as men did. Now you might be thinking, well, that was 1939. Things were different back then. The economy wasn't what it is today, and people were way more traditional. But when researchers ran the same study again in the late 60s and early 70s, right after the sexual revolution had supposedly changed everything about how Americans viewed relationships, guess what? They got pretty much the same results. The preferences hadn't budged an inch, despite all the social changes. When researchers ran the same study again in the 1980s, guess what? Same results. But here's the thing, all these studies were done in America, so they wondered if women in other parts of the world might think differently. So they decided to go big, really big. They took their research to 37 different cultures across 6 continents and 5 islands. They talked to all sorts of people, city folks in Brazil, people living in South African slums, you name it. They covered pretty much every type of society you can think of. Places where people marry one person, places where multiple marriages are okay, capitalist countries, socialist countries, Catholic communities, Jewish communities, the whole 9 yards. And wouldn't you know it, the pattern held up everywhere. Women consistently placed way more importance on their potential partner's financial situation than men did. Now there's actually a theory about why this happens, structural resource scarcity theory. It suggests that traditionally, men have held most of the cards when it comes to money and resources in society. The theory goes that men have historically used this economic advantage to maintain control, even working together to keep this system going, limiting women's access to resources. Think of it as an old boys club, but on a global scale. Since women have historically been left out of the money game, they've often had to be strategic, choosing partners with power, status, and good income as their ticket to financial security. Now, you might think men don't care as much about their partner's financial situation simply because they've traditionally held the purse strings. That's part of it. Yes, men have typically had more economic power. And yes, this has given them a lot of influence over women's lives. Look, we definitely need to work on creating better economic opportunities for women. But here's the thing. The idea that men are all sitting around in some secret club plotting to keep women down, that's just not backed up by any evidence. As we saw in our last video, when women compete with each other, it's often about looks. You know, perfecting their makeup, keeping up with beauty trends, fine-tuning every little detail to stand out from the crowd. But guys, they compete differently. For them, it's all about who's got more resources. And this difference isn't random. It comes down to what women tend to look for in a partner. It's like a feedback loop. Just as men's focus on looks drives women to work on their appearance, women's preference for financial stability pushes men to compete for resources. Think about it. Our female ancestors tended to go for guys who could provide, while steering clear of those who couldn't. So naturally, over time, men develop this deep-seated drive to acquire and control resources to make themselves more attractive partners. And when men fight for resources, they're not just trying to get ahead, they're actively competing against other men. It becomes this intense game of climbing the ladder, grabbing opportunities, pushing others out of powerful positions, and securing it, all to make themselves more appealing as potential partners. The competition between men can get pretty intense, and the statistics tell a pretty sobering story. Across all societies and cultures, men tend to have shorter lifespans than women. The numbers are pretty striking. Adult men are 4 times more likely to die than women. They're way more likely to die from risky behavior, 3 times more likely to be murdered, and sadly, 3 times more likely to take their own lives. Now, there are lots of reasons for these differences in life expectancy, but one big factor is how men compete for resources. Guys who struggle to find partners often end up taking bigger risks. When they don't have access to resources to get what they want through conventional means, some turn to violence. This can lead to a dark spiral of gambling, theft, robbery, and sexual crimes. Sure, there are multiple factors at play here, but being single, or even worse, being single and unemployed, often leaves these men feeling unstable and desperate, which can push them to take even more risks. Let's look at Detroit in 1972, when the US economy took a nosedive. In a city where jobs equal survival, Detroit's 11% unemployment rate spelled trouble. When resources got this scarce, some men turned to violence. The numbers tell the story. 41% of men who committed homicides that year were jobless. Without steady work, many men struggled to find partners. The city's single rate was 43%. Even more telling, among homicide cases, 69% of male victims and 73% of male perpetrators were unmarried. When you look at the profile of these offenders, some patterns emerge. They tend to be guys who struggle with dating, don't have steady jobs, are single, and are typically pretty young, mostly between 16 and 30. And even when we're not talking about crime, men still take more risks than women. Just look at how many more guys work in dangerous jobs. Now, some people say women only go for rich and powerful men because they're left out of resources and shut out from making their own money. But evolutionary psychologists put this theory to the test. They looked at women's salaries and compared how different income levels affected what they looked for in a partner. This pattern shows up in countries all around the world. What's really interesting is that women with high incomes are actually more particular about their partner's earnings, not less. The more a woman earns, the more likely she is to want a partner with an impressive job title and social standing. Women from well-off families tend to look for partners who match their social background too. In short, it's common for women to marry up, while the opposite, marrying down, is much rarer. Here's the catch though. Unlike those shrikes we talked about earlier that can show off their collected treasures, humans can't exactly display their bank accounts and assets for all to see. So women have to rely on other signs to figure out a potential partner's financial situation. First off, social status is a big indicator. The higher up the social ladder a guy is, the more likely he is to have both resources and influence. This connection between status and resources isn't new. It's been a constant throughout human history. You can still see it today in traditional societies around the world. Take the Tiwi people of Australia, the Yanomama in Venezuela, or the Ache in Paraguay. In all these societies, the leaders and elders hold positions of power. These leaders command respect, have access to more resources, and enjoy special privileges. No surprise, they tend to have more wives and partners. But in today's world, where traditional social classes aren't so clear-cut anymore, women look for different signs of status. Education has become kind of a new class marker, like a modern version of social class. Most women see a lack of education as a major red flag when considering a potential husband. Women typically go for guys who've made it in their careers like doctors, lawyers, professors, successful entrepreneurs, and high-ranking officials. They tend to steer clear of men who get pushed around by other guys or haven't earned respect from their peers. Here's a funny story. An evolutionary psychologist once overheard an interesting conversation while eating out. 4 women were complaining about how there weren't any good men around. The irony? They were surrounded by male waiters. All single, by the way, since none wore wedding rings. In other words, when these women said there weren't any good men around, what they really meant was there weren't any men with the kind of social standing they were looking for. The waiters? They weren't even on these women's radar because of their job status. For most women, a man's social status isn't just a nice bonus, it's a must-have. With these standards in mind, the dating pool is surprisingly small for women with college degrees. Women generally outnumber men on college campuses. This is happening worldwide, but it's especially noticeable in American universities. Take fall 2023, for example. 55% of undergrads were women and 45% were men. While that gap might not seem huge, it matters because these educated women typically aren't interested in dating guys with less education. Meanwhile, men, they often don't care about a woman's education or career. Many are mostly focused on youth and looks, so these educated women are caught in a double bind. They're not just competing with other college-educated women for partners, they're also up against women who might have less education but tick all the boxes that men traditionally look for. It's like playing a game on hard mode. These women need to prove they've got both brains and beauty, which isn't exactly making their dating lives any easier. Just as there aren't that many supermodels walking around, there aren't that many high-powered successful men either. Most guys are pretty average when it comes to social status. That's why women often look for other signs that a guy has potential. One of the biggest things women look for is drive. You know, that go-getter attitude. Picture 2 guys starting from the same place. The ambitious, hard-working one usually ends up with better education, a higher position, and a bigger paycheck than the guy who's just coasting through life. Most women see ambition and work ethic as non-negotiable qualities. A guy who's just drifting, with no real goals or motivation, that's often a deal breaker. When women see a pattern of unemployment or laziness, many will head for the exit. But it's not just about seeing someone hustle. Women are also looking for what's going on inside their skull. They tend to place a high value on intelligence, because smart guys usually have more opportunities. They get into better schools, land better jobs, and yeah, usually make more money. It's like a preview of their future earning potential. Having a sharp mind isn't just about success though, it's also about genetics. Women often think about what traits their kids might inherit, but the tricky part is unlike someone's job title or bank account, you can't exactly spot intelligence just by looking at someone. While you can't exactly measure someone's IQ just by looking at them, there are some telling signs. Take a good sense of humor, for instance. It's not just about making people laugh, it shows creativity and quick thinking. Plus, funny people tend to be better at building relationships, which can open doors to opportunities down the line. Since women typically value intelligence, a lack of it can be major turnoffs. Like when a guy completely misses social cues, doesn't get jokes that everyone else finds funny, or says exactly the wrong thing at the wrong time. Even worse, when he can't follow simple explanations, or keeps arguing even when he's clearly wrong. Women often see these as red flags that signal a lack of smarts. All these traits we've talked about, they're connected to how well a guy might do in life. But here's the catch. Just like how a guy can't be 100% sure a child is his just because he picked an attractive partner, a woman can't be certain that a successful guy will share his resources with her and their kids. It's a bit of a gamble either way. Just like how choosing an attractive partner doesn't guarantee faithfulness, a successful man might see his resources as a ticket to play the field rather than a reason to settle down. For some guys, having money and status makes them think they've got more options, not more responsibility. Some less reliable men might think, if I'm doing this well, why limit myself? Instead of building a family with one partner, they're tempted to spread their genes around. The fact that you can't predict whether a successful guy will stick around and invest in his family, combined with the fact that women have way more at stake when it comes to having kids, has led women to develop 3 key things they look for: reliability, stability, and commitment. Picture this. A caveman is out hunting when he suddenly thinks, nah, I'm tired, and takes a nap instead, kissing goodbye to that day's dinner. Or maybe he actually catches something big. But on his way home, he spots an attractive woman and decides to give her the whole catch. Not exactly what you'd call reliable behavior, right? This kind of impulsive, short-sighted behavior usually points to something deeper: emotional instability and plain old selfishness. These guys tend to be the center of their own universe, hoarding everything for themselves and being super possessive. They'll drain their partner's time and energy, get crazy jealous over nothing, like their wife just talking to someone else, act without thinking, and can't even show up on time to save their lives. Unlike emotionally stable folks, these unstable guys are prone to serious mood swings. They might break down crying over the smallest setback. Even worse, they might turn abusive, whether it's with their words or their fists. In short, women tend to go for reliable, emotionally stable guys to avoid drama and ensure a steady future. The dream scenario for women is finding a man who loves them enough to go all in for them and their kids. But for guys, they often prefer to spread their genes around. This mismatch is exactly why women pay such close attention to how men express their feelings. After all, emotional openness is often the best indicator of whether a guy is really ready to commit. That's why women hate it when men keep their feelings under wraps. They'll often dissect every conversation and interaction with their friends, trying to crack the code of what their date is really thinking and feeling. 25% of women in the dating phase say their partners don't meet their emotional needs. This jumps to 30% in the first year of marriage, and by year 4, it's up to a whopping 59%. Meanwhile, hardly any guys complain about their partners not being emotionally available enough. On the flip side, 30% of men say their partners are too emotional while dating. This number creeps up to 34% in the first year of marriage and shoots up to 49% by year 4. Meanwhile, hardly any women think their guys are too emotional. Women sometimes use certain tactics, consciously or not, to test a guy's commitment. One classic move: getting a bit moody. Why? Because when they're emotionally down, they need their partner's comfort and attention. This usually means the guy has to drop whatever he's doing to be there for her, which takes time and emotional energy. By watching how he handles these situations, a woman can gauge just how much he really cares. If a guy isn't willing to put in this kind of effort, it's probably a sign he's not that invested in the relationship. But if he's not only there for the tough moments, but also goes the extra mile, buying thoughtful gifts or spending quality time helping her feel better, it shows he's all in. Men and women see time and attention very differently in relationships. Women typically want their partner's undivided attention and commitment. They'd love to be their guy's top priority all the time. But many men push back against this, wanting to spread their time across different areas of their lives. This clash is often what leads to fights between couples. Women complain that their partners won't buy them gifts or spend quality time together, while men feel their partners are asking for too much of their time and energy. This helps explain why many women get frustrated when their partners are glued to video games. It's not just about the gaming itself, it's what it represents: a lack of ambition and a huge chunk of time and energy going into a virtual world instead of the relationship. The same goes for any consuming hobby that takes their partner's attention away from the relationship. These preferences show that women really value guys who are career-driven and fully invested in the relationship. That's partly why older men often have an edge in dating. Their maturity and stability make them seem like a safer bet. This isn't just a modern thing. Let's look back at ancient times. Sure, as men got older, they might have lost some of their physical edge, but what they lost in raw strength, they more than made up for in experience. The knowledge, patience, skills, and wisdom they picked up along the way were way more valuable than pure muscle power. Fast forward to today, and you'll notice a similar pattern. As people age, their status and wealth tend to grow too. You see this across pretty much every industry and social level. It's like compound interest, but for social and professional success. Think about it. You rarely see guys in their 20s running companies or sitting in executive suites. Why? Because building the kind of experience and connections you need for those top jobs takes time. Usually more time than someone in their 20s has had. Older guys often bring more to the table than just maturity. They're usually better at handling life's curveballs, more emotionally grounded, and typically more financially stable. These perks make them pretty appealing compared to younger men. There's a consistent pattern across different cultures. Women tend to go for slightly older guys. This is especially true for women in their 20s, who usually end up with partners 2 or 3 years their senior. Here's an interesting question though. If men typically hit their financial peak in their 40s or 50s, why aren't young women lining up to date these guys? The answer's pretty practical. If there's too big an age gap, there are some real concerns. For one, an older partner might not be around for the long haul. Plus, couples with big age differences often struggle with different worldviews and life experiences, which can lead to constant disagreements. Nobody wants to spend their relationship arguing about basic stuff because they're from completely different generations. There's also the biological factor to consider. The quality of their sperm tends to decline with age, which can lead to health issues in children. This is a big deal for women who want to start a healthy family. So when it comes to age preferences, women typically go for guys who are a bit older, but still have their whole lives ahead of them, not someone who's already got one foot in the retirement home. They want someone who can be there for the long haul, not someone who might face health issues down the road. While women usually prefer more mature partners, this isn't set in stone, especially when options are limited. Sometimes you'll see older women dating much younger men. This often happens because both groups might have trouble finding partners in their usual age range. Older women might find it hard to attract successful men their age, while young guys might not yet have the status or income that most women their age are looking for. So they end up finding compatibility with each other. A woman's own success can shake up traditional dating patterns. Successful women with their own resources might date younger guys. But here's the interesting part. While they might have casual relationships with younger men who aren't as well off, when it comes to settling down and getting married, they often still prefer older, financially stable partners. But it's not just about money and stability. Women also have specific preferences when it comes to physical characteristics in a partner, and these preferences play a big role in who they end up choosing. These physical preferences aren't just about looks, they're also about feeling safe. Back in prehistoric times, women faced a serious challenge. Men were typically physically stronger, which could put women at risk of violence or assault. One big advantage of having a long-term partner was having someone who could protect you rather than threaten you. Having a tall guy as a partner can make women feel much safer from potential threats and harassment. That's why most women don't see shorter men as ideal long-term partners. They just can't offer the same kind of physical protection that makes women feel secure. If you look at dating apps like Tinder today, tall guys tend to get way more likes and matches than their shorter or average height counterparts. This preference actually goes way back to our ancient roots, when women needed strong partners for protection. Beyond just height, women are often drawn to guys with that classic V-shaped build, broad shoulders, and a narrower waist. This kind of athletic build typically means the guy's got some serious upper body strength, which naturally makes women feel more protected and secure around them. As we talked about in our last video, guys are typically more interested in casual relationships, which is why they're super attracted to women in tight or revealing clothes. It really catches their attention. But here's the funny thing. When guys wear tight or revealing clothes themselves, it usually turns women off. Why? Because this kind of style often signals that a guy might be more interested in casual hookups, which most women aren't really into. So, while women definitely appreciate a guy with a good body, they're actually more drawn to men who dress more modestly. It sends the message that these guys are more serious about relationships and commitment. Think of it this way. Women's perfect guy is someone who looks stylish, but not showy in his clothes, but happens to be totally fit underneath. It's that perfect mix of looking good while staying classy that really gets their attention. To conclude it, when it comes to finding a long-term partner, women typically go for guys who can both provide for their future and are ready to commit to a relationship. Plus, being tall and athletic looking definitely helps. That's why you'll notice guys often compete with each other in these areas, whether it's career success, fitness, or showing their relationship material. So, guys often try all sorts of ways to catch a woman's attention in the dating game. They'll talk up their achievements and make sure to show they're doing well financially. You'll see them driving fancy cars and dropping hints about their big roles at work, all to get noticed. Sometimes they even get jealous of other guys' success and might try to make their competition look bad to boost their own image. These guys might tell women that their rivals are broke or have no goals in life, or they might make fun of them to suggest they're not too bright. They also love to show off their athletic abilities by beating other guys in sports, while downplaying their opponent's skills to make themselves look better. Now, let's switch gears from talking about women's long-term dating preferences to their short-term dating choices. It's interesting that women's casual dating behavior has always been kind of mysterious to researchers. The tricky part is that in many societies, if a woman gets a reputation for casual dating, it might hurt her chances of finding a long-term relationship later. Even in today's more open-minded society, there can still be some social judgment about women's dating choices. Another big risk for women in casual dating is the possibility of getting pregnant without having any support from their partner. That's a huge deal. This is especially risky for married women having affairs. Think about it. If a married woman has an affair, she's not just putting her time and energy into something that might go nowhere, but she could also lose her husband's support completely. Plus, if she ends up having kids with different fathers, it can create all sorts of complications. Her kids might not feel as close to each other, and there could be more rivalry between them. On top of all that, women face a higher risk of getting STIs from casual relationships than men do, which is definitely something to worry about. For women, casual dating can come with some serious downsides. They're dealing with all kinds of risks and potential problems in these short-term relationships. That's why researchers, especially those studying how evolution affects human behavior, have been super interested in understanding why women sometimes choose casual relationships despite all these risks. In fact, these scientists have come up with 5 different ideas to explain what might motivate women in these situations. Let's start with what researchers call the mate-switching hypothesis. Sometimes a husband might stop supporting his family, or, even worse, become abusive toward his wife and kids. When this happens, his value as a life partner obviously takes a huge hit. Back in ancient times, women in these situations needed to find help elsewhere, so they might start seeing someone else. This could either push their bad marriage to end faster or help them find a new permanent partner. A study looked into why women might have affairs and found some interesting patterns. Women reported that one of the biggest reasons was that it helped them end a bad relationship sooner, giving them a chance to find someone better. This better partner might be someone who'd actually spend quality time with them, or maybe someone more successful with a more stable financial situation. Here's an interesting difference between men and women. The research shows that women typically only have affairs when they're really unhappy in their current relationship. Men, on the other hand, might cheat even if they're perfectly happy in their marriage. Pretty different approaches, right? Looking at this from history's perspective, these different behaviors go way back to ancient times, when surviving was tough and shaped how men and women approached relationships differently. Life was especially dangerous for men back then. They might go hunting and never come back, get killed in tribal wars, or even lose everything overnight. Imagine being a respected leader one day, and the next day you're stripped of all your power and possessions. Smart women in these tough times often kept their options open. That way, if something happened to their partner, they wouldn't have to start from zero in finding someone new to help support them and their family. The second theory suggests something interesting. Women might use casual dating as a kind of trial run. It's called the short-term for long-term goals hypothesis. It's like taking a car for a test drive. They can check if the guy has any deal breakers or see if they click together. If everything feels right, they might turn that casual relationship into something more serious. It's basically a way to find the right long-term partner without committing too soon. According to a study, when women were asked why they got into casual relationships, the top reason was, "I was really attracted to how good-looking he was." The second most common reason, "I actually wanted something long-term with him. I thought our casual thing might turn into a real relationship." Most women aren't too keen on getting involved with guys who already have partners. They figure these guys are probably just looking for a good time. Guys, on the other hand, typically don't care whether a potential short-term partner is already in a relationship or not. So basically, some women see casual dating as a stepping stone to building a serious, committed relationship. The third theory, resource hypothesis, takes us back to ancient times. Back then, women could get immediate benefits from casual relationships, like food and other necessities. They might also keep their children's father's identity unclear, which helped them get support from multiple men. Plus, when their regular partner was away, they could get protection from these other relationships. While the way women seek support has changed in modern times, they still tend to look for certain qualities in casual partners that echo these ancient preferences. When it comes to casual dating, modern women tend to be especially drawn to guys with 4 key traits. They like someone who's not afraid to spend money on them right away, who shows they care through thoughtful gifts early on, who enjoys living the high life, and who's known for being generous with their money. This explains why women typically aren't into guys who are cheap or tight with money in casual relationships. It usually means the guy isn't willing to show his investment in the relationship right off the bat. However, when it comes to long-term relationships, women actually prefer a partner who's more careful with money, rather than someone who throws it around carelessly. This shows how differently women view money and resources in short-term versus long-term relationships. While casual relationships might come with some immediate perks, most women are really looking for someone who can provide lasting financial stability, not just temporary gifts and treats. That's why when a woman's current partner is going through tough times financially, and she meets someone with better career prospects and potential, she might be more tempted to start seeing the new guy. The fourth theory is pretty interesting. It's all about good genes, and it's called the genetic benefit hypothesis. Scientists sometimes call it the sexy son hypothesis. The idea is that if a woman has a child with a really good-looking guy, there's a chance her son will inherit those attractive features. An attractive son might have better luck with dating and eventually have more kids of his own, which means more grandkids for mom in the long run. As we saw in our previous discussion about how guys choose their partners, these super popular men are usually up for a brief fling, as long as women don't expect anything serious. In casual relationships, women tend to be pickier about looks than they are in long-term relationships. They're really drawn to guys who are not just physically attractive, but also catch other women's attention. Plus, they're big on personality traits like courage, confidence, strength, and a good sense of humor. Here's something really telling. Studies show that women are almost twice as likely to have a satisfying physical experience with their casual partners compared to their husbands. Research also shows some interesting biological responses. When women have a more satisfying experience during intimacy, their bodies are actually more receptive to conception, retaining about 5% more genetic material compared to less satisfying encounters. Sure, 5% might not sound like much, but think about this. When this small difference keeps happening over thousands of generations, it can actually make a huge difference in evolution. Basically, women are more likely to get pregnant when they have a more satisfying experience. This suggests that a woman's physical response during intimacy might actually be nature's way of choosing which partner's genes get passed on. And interestingly, this doesn't always favor the husband. A big study in Britain looked at this more closely. They asked 3,679 women to keep track of their monthly cycles and when they were intimate with their husbands. Women who had other partners were also asked to note when these encounters happened. The study found that women who were seeing someone on the side tended to meet up with them during their most fertile days, the times when they were most likely to get pregnant. And get this, most women weren't even consciously aware they were doing this. It wasn't planned at all. The fifth theory suggests that some women might have affairs to get back at cheating husbands, either to stop them from cheating again, or to make them realize other guys are interested in their wife. Kind of a wake-up call to pay more attention to their marriage. But since there isn't much evidence to back this up, we'll skip the details. There's usually not just one reason why women might choose casual relationships. They might be looking for a potential new long-term partner, hoping to get something more serious, seeking various kinds of support, or being drawn to someone with particularly attractive qualities. Often, it's a mix of several of these reasons working together, and that wraps up the standards and strategies women use in choosing partners. And all this comes from 2 books, Evolutionary Psychology and The Evolution of Desire. Look, I know some of what we've talked about in these 2 videos might ruffle some feathers, so if anything here bugs you, take it up with the book authors, not me. Don't shoot the messenger. Finally, I want to challenge what these books are saying. Sure, we've got our basic instincts, but there's so much more to being human. If people only get together based on what the other person brings to the table, looks, money, status, and then stop putting in the effort, that relationship is probably not going to last. Even if they seem perfect on paper, real, lasting relationships need both people to keep showing up and working at it. It's not just about the superficial stuff. The couples who really make it work have this amazing quality. They never get tired of learning about each other. Even when life throws them curveballs, they stick together. They face all of life's ups and downs as a team, keeping that deep connection and commitment to each other strong. When you think about it, it's pretty incredible. 2 completely different people choosing to build a life together, constantly discovering new things about each other and their love. That's not just evolution at work. That's one of humanity's greatest achievements.